Hey guys, it's me, Bets Golden. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are talking about ink. I really hope that with this video, you're going to be able to figure out between two inks right now that are out on the market that are, I think they both kind of make the same type promises and they look like they do the same thing. But there's some differences, I think. I don't know because I haven't compared them side by side. I know a few. But if you're struggling between choosing between your Distress Oxide with Ranger and your Catherine Puller inks, which let's face it, these two right now are kind of the hottest on the market. And in my opinion, they kind of do the same thing. The color palette's a little bit different. I think that this dries a little bit more chalky. This one doesn't, dries a little bit more vibrant. So we're gonna compare these back to back. And the reason why I'm doing an intro to this video before I start is because I wanted to state that before you started just looking at my hands and staring at the screen for 2 minutes of me talking and doing nothing. So I thought I would just explain it beforehand. Now, with that being said, there are some inks out right now that are standby and true, and I don't think that there is a one ink that does everything. There are some out there that really only do certain things and lean themselves well towards certain things. And so I'm not dismissing those ink pads, those products, those companies. I'm just comparing the two hottest ink, that not hottest, but probably the most talked about ink pads out there, both brands. I'm going to compare them next to each other, and I'm not stating that one is going to be better than the other. I just want to see what the differences are, what the final look is, and then you can make a decision before you go out and purchase, you know, $65 worth of an ink set. I know that for me, I wanted to make a good choice, and I had Distress Oxides to begin with, and it took a little bit of a time for me to take the plunge just to buy the first 12. And then when I saw Catherine Puller, it took me about 2 years to get to a point where I was willing to go ahead and make the purchases, and some things that sent me over the edge and pushed me in that direction to do so. Number one, I really was impressed with the color palette on it, and I hate to say it, I love her packaging. I think that it's cute. Number two, she finally came out with mini inks, ink pads, and so I like the minis better than I do the bigger ink pads, just because it's easier for me to store and I can have more ink. My real estate, you know, in my craft room is super important to me, so I really like to try to condense as much as I can. So because of that, I am going to be able to compare the Distress Oxides against the Catherine Puller ones. The reason why I'm not doing Distress ink is because Distress ink moves with water no matter if you have heat set it or not. It constantly moves. Distress Oxides do not. It is a permanent ink once you do heat set it, and Catherine Puller is as well. So I thought as far as the properties go, these were very similar. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start. I'm going to get my little workstation back there set up, and we are going to start comparing these inks, and hopefully it'll help you make a good decision about what ones you need. And you may need both sets. I mean, I have convinced myself at this point that I need both sets. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And if you haven't subscribed, I hope that you consider doing so. Also, please share this video. I don't know of any video out right now that actually takes these on head to head. And it's because a lot of the influencers in the industry are working for one or the other company, and they really can't. I'm not. Oh, so you're going to get a very honest look at these. And so when I was researching these, I wanted a video that showed them head to head, and I couldn't find one, and I searched. So please make sure that you share these videos with your friends who may be considering if they need them and which ones to buy. I'm hoping that this helps other people out there. And then the other thing I wanted to state was my Catherine Puller inks are relatively new, and these I've had for some time. So there is a slight, it's not entirely foolproof in the sense that it's not like I'm working with two fresh ink pads. I'm working with one that I've had in my stash and one that is relatively new. So naturally the newer one is going to have probably more ink on it, so it might be a little bit more juicy in general. So I don't know how much of that you can take into consideration when you are watching these videos and making a decision on purchasing, because like I said, obviously when you've had an ink pad and you've been using for over a year, it's not going to be as juicy as when you first open it. With that being said though, I will give you my honest opinion about the consistency overall that I see in them and the moisture on both of them. I'm going to tell you my true thoughts because I have worked with both of them brand new, obviously. So yeah, so I'm just going to tell you my experience with them, but you're not going to be able to like physically see them. I don't have any proof of that. I don't have a new distressed oxide that I can show you. So I am very sorry about that. I just wanted to put that out there for you. And let's get on with it. All right, let's go. So for our little experiment today, I tried to take the most light colors that I have in my stash and match them up with the other product line. So I'm going to be comparing Grape Crush against a Wilted Violet, Carved Pumpkin against Orange Twist, and actually I'm just going to set these up here so I can grab them more easily, Limoncello against Squeeze Lemonade, Twisted Citron against Lime Ricky, and then finally Aquatina against Cracked Pistachio. The reason why I'm doing so many is because I want to go ahead and not only compare the ink pads themselves and how they play on their own. I want to know how they interact as far as the color family theory goes with one another, and I hope that makes more sense as I go on. I know that was a big, long, complicated sentence. Anyway, the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to stamp with both of these inks. So I'm going to actually be using the stamp set that Catherine Pooler sends out with the first order. It might be a $50 order or something. I'm not sure. It might just be the first one. It's Stamp of Approval, and I'm going to be stamping the You Did It. And I'm going to first stamp so we can see how this ink stamps in general, and then we're going to go ahead and emboss the image and just see how well they emboss. So I'm going to stamp first, and then with the next color I'll stamp and emboss. The reason why I'm not going to stamp and then emboss the same image is because that's going to allow the first image to have more dry time than the second, so it might not give us an accurate representation of how this ink works. And I really am trying to be as fair as possible in this process as I soak down my ink chamois. Alright, so here we go. The first one I'm going to stamp with is going to be Grape Crush, and I really love the ink pads on this. I am going to just, she says 1 to 2 love taps, so I'm going to go 1, 2, and you don't want to do more because you'll get that bleed through image. And that is how the Catherine Pooler ink pad stamps. Beautiful coverage there. And then I'm going to go ahead and just wipe this clean. And let's go ahead and do our Wilted Violet next. Now, this ink pad is a little bit different. It's not as, I want to say spongy. This isn't spongy. It's not as foamy. So with this one, I can't just do 2 taps because I've had it, number one, for some time, as I mentioned. So I'm going to ink it up like so. And then, all right. So I would say that they stamp about the same. Pretty good coverage. This one looks a little bit more crisp than this one does. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to work on embossing our image. I'm sorry about that squeaking noise. We're going to emboss. So I'm going to stamp, emboss, and then stamp again and emboss just to see how and if these images can stamp and emboss. So I'm going to do orange twist first. So let's just 1, 2. Let me cover it with some of our embossing powder. Now she says that you have a little bit of a working time with this ink. So let's see here. It seems to have stuck rather nicely. And let me move that out of the way. My heat mat can take, my craft mat can take over 400 degrees. So I'm just going to heat set it directly on it. Okay, this did emboss, so the embossing definitely does work with the Catherine Pooler ink. Let's go ahead and try our Distress Oxide in Carved Pumpkin. All right, let's go ahead and do this. I may have to, nope, I can fit it on there. I didn't even know that you could stamp with this until I ran into someone in a craft store and she's like, oh yeah, it stamps beautifully. It embosses beautifully. I'm like, you can emboss with it? So let's see how this one does. All right, got my powder down. It looks like that's stuck very nicely. And it embosses much quicker than Catherine Pooler's did. Okay, so my opinion on this is, as far as stamping with it in general, just straight stamping, I like Catherine Pooler's. I think it does a nice, beautiful, crisp image. And it's clear. As far as embossing goes, they both did good, but I'm going to have to go with this Distress Oxide. It seems to have, it's a little bit more glossy, and it was able to emboss much quicker than Catherine Pooler did. I can see that embossing on it way better than I can on the Catherine Pooler one. All right, so there you go. That's the difference. So 1-up Catherine Pooler on just straight stamping. My vote for Distress Oxide on embossing. Let's move on to using this with some water. For this technique, I am going to just be doing a simple swipe technique, misting it with water and seeing how it reacts. Now, Catherine Pooler is known for being able to literally create your very own customized cardstock color because you can swipe on the paper and get a really nice coverage. Distress Oxide doesn't necessarily say that, but I'm going to use the same type technique on it. So I'm going to work rather quickly. I'm only going to allow 2 swipes of each ink pad, and then I'm going to spray it. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and 1, 2. So already I'm seeing an intensity in Catherine Pooler's, very vivid, very bright. And now let me just put some water on it and let's just see. I'm already seeing that movement on both of the sides of the color. They're both moving, they both are reacting. This one is moving probably just as much as this one, but since the color is actually not as intense, you just can't see it as much. So let me go ahead and take and mop up some of this, and we're going to heat set it, and then I want to throw some more color on over it and spray it and see if it moves even more. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to heat set it, I'm going to spray it again, and let's see if we get any more movement from this. These are both dry. I'm going to go ahead and smack some more water on this, just mist some more water, and let's see if it moves at all after we have heat set it. I will tell you right now that the Distress Oxide side with the cracked pistachio feels very chalky, and my Aquatini by Catherine Pooler does not. It feels much more smooth. This feels much more chalky. So let's just put some more water down now that I've heat set it and see if it moves. And they don't. They do not. It's not moving at all. So both of them are permanent after they have been heat set. They both move with water, they react with water, so they both are permanent after they heat set. So really, those inks perform equal, in my opinion, when you are adding water and then heat setting it. That's an equal, that's a wash on both of them. Next up, we are going to do the dip and swipe method that Distress Oxide is known for, and I purposely have pulled in some colors to use on this method that do not necessarily respect the color family. The reason why I'm doing this is because by mixing a cracked pistachio, a wilted violet, a carved pumpkin, squeezed lemonade, and twisted citron, I am mixing both my cools, my warms, and the color of sin. Purple is your color of sin, meaning that if you mix it with anything other than a red or a blue, you get brown. So Distress Oxide is known for being able to just layer and layer and layer as long as you heat set between, and your colors will never fully blend and create mud. You will be left with a vibrant, beautiful background. And so I want to test that with this. I know this is pretty much going to work because I've done it 100 times, but I want to see if we can do the same technique with the Catherine Pooler inks and have a background that is not muddied with multitudes of colors. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to definitely lay these out separately. I am going to respect the color family for this first time doing this. I'm going to do this 2 times. The first time I'm going to lay this out respecting the color family, meaning I'm going to put my warms down first and heat set it. Then I'm going to put my cool down and heat set it. And then I'm going to put my sin down and heat set it and see what happens. And I'm going to repeat that whole process with Catherine Pooler ink. Then the next technique I'm going to do, I'm actually just going to mix all of the colors together, mist it with some water, and then see what happens. All right, so let's start off first, like I had said, with my warms. So I'm going to take my piece of paper right here, get it ready to go, and I'm just going to lay out my lemonade color, my carved pumpkin. I'm going to take some water, and I'm just going to get it to bubble up like so. And I'm just going to start to lay out that color. All right. Now, for the sake of the video, I am going to pick up that beautiful ink. I'm very sorry if this upsets you. I know, but I don't want to sit here and waste it and dry it and try to lay out more. All right, so here we go. So for this one, I'm going to lay out those cool colors now, which is my cracked pistachio and my twisted citron. Going to go ahead and just mist this down, making sure I get some of those beautiful color bubbles. And I'm going to lay this out. All right, so far so good. Let me heat set this and then we'll do our color of sin, purple. So there's no mud, and they do layer lovely on top of each other. It does leave a chalky, milky finish, which we knew. Tim Holtz says that it does that. No surprise there. Now we're going to lay down some wilted violet. Now this is the test, right? But I know this is going to work. This is how I use this ink all the time. This is what Distress Oxide is famous for, is able to color build and not get mud. So I'm just more so doing this so we have a point of reference when we go ahead and we lay out the Catherine Pooler inks and see if hers can do the same thing. Now, isn't that interesting? You can see the other layers down below, and it does look, I'm not going to say muddy, but that's interesting to me. It didn't layer quite like I expected it to. Okay, so one of the cool things with the Distress Oxide is that it's known for, if you're not entirely pleased with how it is, you just keep doing it. It's not completely lost yet. You just keep working until you get to a point where you like what you see. So I'm going to go ahead and just lay out some more purple on this. There we go. And I like that. It's showing through nicely. All right, I'm not seeing that mud that I was concerned about. I think it looks pretty darn good. Yeah, it's not exactly what I had thought it would end up being, but that doesn't really matter because it's Distress Oxide. Part of the fun is the unpredictability of what your end result's going to be. I'm going to lay down some more cracked pistachio on this just because I feel like there's a lot of the yellow and orange on it. And so I'm just going to put down some more cracked pistachio, and then we're going to move on to trying this technique with Catherine Pooler's ink. All right. There we go. All right. Something else to keep in mind too is if your paper is not completely dry, it will still move. So you really need to make sure that your paper is dry before you start trying to layer the colors on. pretty cool. I'm kind of impressed. That's really awesome. Now, when you do dry, if this wasn't my last layer, I would go ahead and flip over and do the back, because you will get water that seeps through the back, so you need to get both sides dry. Now, let's go ahead and try this same technique with our Catherine Pooler ink. Now, I don't know if how this is going to work, but let's just see. So this is our end result of our Distress Oxide. I'm going to set that off. I'll bring it back on camera. And I'm going to do the same thing again with this. I'm going to start off with our warms, then I'll go to our cools, and then I'll go to the color of Sin, just the same way. Now with hers, I'm not going to swipe because her ink pad is so intense. I can literally just dab. And I probably could have just dabbed once. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my water and get that to bead up just like I did with the Distress Oxides. And let's see what happens. Ooh, that's a very beautiful, vibrant blend. I am liking that. Let's dry it and see if we get that chalky finish or if it's going to be different. Okay, that's interesting. It doesn't dry as chalky, but I can definitely see a little bit of a chalky residue on it. So maybe that's just something that they have to include in the property of the ink. So this one I'm going to do Lime Ricky, which is the green, and this one is going to be the Aquatina. So let's go ahead and see if this creates some mud. All right, so there's this. Let me go ahead and dry this. I'm not really seeing any mud. So that blended quite nicely as long as I dried it. That's pretty. I'm really liking this effect. All right, next up is going to be the Grape Crush, and her purple is really vibrant, so this is going to be fun. Let's see how this works. Again, got that nice going, and dab it on. Ooh, look how vibrant that is. Super vibrant. All right, so I'm going to stop there and heat set this. And let's see, we'll compare them back to back. So this is our end product of the Catherine Pooler dip and swipe type technique, and here is our Tim Holtz. So right off the bat, I'm noticing that the Distress Oxide tended to move a little bit more freely than the Catherine Pooler did. However, the Catherine Pooler colors are much more vibrant. Both of them do have a slight chalky look to them. This does not feel chalky. This does feel chalky. This also looks much more chalky to me than this one does. Something that is interesting to me, because I'm thinking that the properties in these inks have to be, I don't think that they're the same. I don't even know how similar they are. But there has to be some components of the makeup of them that are the same to allow them to move, mix with water, and then set after they've been dried. And one thing that Tim Holtz has said is that you'll never be able to catch these in minis, whereas these you can get in minis, and he said it's because you can't get that entire property in a mini like you can with the Distress inks that constantly move. And she's put hers in a mini. So that tells me that there's something different about them. The results of both of these are beautiful. And if you don't like the chalky look to this and you already have Distress Oxides, what you can do is you can take some Distress Micro Glaze, put a little bit on your finger. I put a little on my fingernail. And then I go over and I rub it in, and it's going to take that chalkiness away. Now, he did create this bottle, he says, so that you can go ahead and you put your sponge dabber, your blender in it. However, it's a sponge and that soaks it up and you'll go through your product a lot faster. So I prefer just to use my hands. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to take and buff it off. And I'm just going to buff it off with this, and that will help that chalky feel dissipate. It does help a little bit of shine and luster on it, but that's just something you can do if you want to combat that texture issue. All right, now we're going to throw, I'm going to do one in which I'm going to throw all of the color, warm, cools, and the colors send down at one time. And we're going to do this process of dipping and swiping with both of the inks. We should get mud with both of the inks, just to let you know, but let's just see. I'm going to try to be, I'm not going to try to mix them too much, so I'm going to put my citron down there. I'm going to do my green here. I'm going to do my cracked pistachio here. Let me do my carved pumpkin. I'm doing Distress Oxide first. And then let me do some wilted violet over here. I'm going to go ahead and just take that water and make sure I get them nice and misted down. And also, if you want them to move less, then just don't add as much water. And I'm just going to take it and kind of go through just like that. All right. And see, I'm already starting to get some mud. I just wanted to see how they worked together all at once, if they could keep any of their color integrity. And this isn't that bad. It could be worse. Alright, so that was the Distress Oxide, just throwing everything down at one time. Yes, I didn't mix it all the way through. I did try to keep it kind of separated, but I couldn't mix it because I just knew it would be pointless. I just wanted to see if they could blend with warms and cools and see how they interacted. And really, that did a lot better than what I anticipated. However, I am quite shocked with how lost my cool tones get with the Distress Oxide. They don't tend to hold their integrity at all once they are mixed in with their warms. So that to me is interesting. The warm definitely dominates along with that purple. So let's go ahead and do this same technique with the Catherine Pooler inks. And let's see how, if hers hold their shape, I should say. So we're going to do the lemon over here. I'm going to do lime Ricky down here. Orange citron right here. Aquatina, and then we're going to do the grape crush off to the side, and I'm going to go ahead and just spray this down just like I did the other one, and let's just go ahead and just do the same type rotating. Look how vivid that is. It's really vivid. But you know, you can see right here on her ink pads, those the blotchiness on them. And I noticed that before, but I really didn't notice it. It wasn't as apparent as it is right now. So that's very interesting. Let's go ahead and dry this. Okay, I see something that is very cool. I want you to look right here. I have Aquatina and Orange Twist, and look, it doesn't mix. The integrity of the color stays true. That to me is very interesting. It does not blend, it stays true. And I was able to layer like that on top of wet pigment, wet ink. So that to me is super interesting. All right, you guys, I certainly hope that you enjoyed this video and it gave you a little bit more insight into Catherine Pooler and Distress Oxide and the differences in both of these inks. You know, it's a hard call to make. I think it really depends on what you do in your craft room, what you want in your craft room, and what your style is. You can't really go wrong with either one of these. I don't know what to tell you. Oh, something I wanted to also show you was the difference on your ink pads. This ink pad has, it's not so spongy. It's more solid, it's firm, okay? And this ink pad, the Orange Twist, is definitely, it's like a cross between a foam and a sponge. So the ink pads, I prefer the Catherine Pooler ink pads over just the pad itself, over the Distress Oxide ink pads. They also maintain quite a bit of moisture, and when I opened this up and used it straight from the packaging, like brand new, it was very moist. Distress Oxide was not as moist, but then again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So it just really depends on what you're looking for and what you want to do in your craft room. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I certainly hope that you found this beneficial. I have my shop links provided down below at some of the best places I think you can find both of these product lines. So make sure that you use those. Help support my channel in doing so because they are affiliated, and I do turn around and just use that to bring more awesome content to you. Until next time, I'm Betsy Golden. Happy crafting.